Mercedes just lost their biggest advantage, and it didn't happen on track. The FIA has stepped in with a shocking battery fix that could completely change how power is delivered in Formula One. The same system that helped Antonelli win under pressure, with technical problems, still holding off Norris lap after lap, is now being restricted. And here's why this is huge. We're talking about energy deployment. The hidden performance. The difference between pulling away or getting caught. If this fix hits the way teams expect, Mercedes won't just be slower. They'll be vulnerable. Because take away that consistency, and suddenly, every rival has a chance. And the scariest part is this. If their dominance was built on that system, this isn't just a rule change. It's the moment everything starts to collapse. At first, nothing about Miami pointed to the battery. It pointed to perfection. Antonelli's race had every element that usually destroys consistency. A chaotic start, losing positions into turn 1, dropping into heavy traffic, forced to fight instead of control. That kind of opening doesn't just cost track position. It drains energy. Every overtake, every acceleration, every lap spent in dirty air, it all increases demand on the battery system. And that's where the first question appears. Because instead of struggling later in the race, the Mercedes stayed strong. Lap after lap. No visible drop in deployment. No loss of acceleration out of corners. No moment where the car suddenly felt weaker. And that's not normal. Because in Formula One, energy deployment is one of the most sensitive limits. You push too hard early, you pay for it later. You defend too much, you lose attack potential. Everything is a balance. But in Miami, that balance never seemed to break. And then came the key moment. Lap 27. The undercut. Fresh tires, yes, but also maximum energy deployment at exactly the right time. That outlap wasn't just fast, it was perfectly supported. Every straight, every exit, every acceleration phase working together to create the gap. One lap. That's all it took. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because later in the race, the problems start. Gearbox issues. Throttle response not behaving correctly. The kind of problems that should disrupt how power is delivered to the wheels. But again, nothing changes. The pace holds. The consistency stays. Norris pushes, but never gets that final opportunity. And that's the contradiction. Because if mechanical systems are struggling, energy delivery usually becomes harder to control. Less predictable. Less consistent. But that didn't happen. And that's exactly why the FIA started looking at this area. Because when a car maintains perfect energy deployment, even under stress, even with technical issues, it suggests something deeper. Not just good driving. Not just good strategy. But a system working at a level others can't match. And now, that system is being limited. Because this new battery fix isn't about reducing power completely. It's about controlling how that power is used. How it's deployed. How consistent it can be across a lap, and across an entire race. Which means everything we saw in Miami is about to be tested again. But without that same level of freedom. And that's where the tension begins. Because if Mercedes built their advantage on managing that energy better than anyone else, then this rule doesn't just slow them down. It forces them to change how the car behaves in every phase of the lap. And that is where things can start to fall apart. And this is where everything starts to affect the entire grid. Because once the FIA limits something as critical as battery deployment, it doesn't just change one team. It changes how every car behaves. But not equally. Some teams lose a little. Others lose everything. And right now, all eyes are on Mercedes. Because think about what made them different in Miami. It wasn't just speed. It was how the car delivered that speed. Smooth. Consistent. Almost unaffected by race conditions. While others had moments, small drops in performance, tiny inconsistencies in energy release, Mercedes didn't. And that's exactly what this fix is designed to eliminate. Because now, energy deployment becomes more restricted, more standardized, less flexible. Which means teams can no longer stretch performance over a lap in the same way. They can't choose where to gain more than others. They can't hide advantages in how the system behaves under pressure. Everything becomes tighter. And that's where the balance shifts. Because if Mercedes was operating at a higher level in this area, using energy in a smarter, more effective way, then this change doesn't just reduce performance. It removes their edge. Now imagine what that does in a race situation. You're defending. Before, you had that extra push out of the corner. Now, it's smaller. You're attacking. Before, you could time your deployment perfectly. Now, it's more limited. Over a full race distance, those small differences add up. Lap after lap, corner after corner, until suddenly, the gap disappears. And that's all McLaren needs. Because Norris was already within reach in Miami. Close enough to apply pressure, close enough to stay in the window, just waiting for the smallest opportunity. That opportunity never came. But now, it might. Ferrari, despite their struggles, also benefits. Their biggest issue wasn't raw speed. It was maintaining performance over long runs. And what does this fix target? Consistency. Which means the field compresses. Red Bull, the same story. Not the fastest, but close enough. And when the top car loses even a fraction of its advantage, being close is enough. Because Formula One doesn't need big changes to flip a race. It needs small ones. 1/10 per lap. One weaker exit. One moment where the car doesn't respond exactly the same way. That's all it takes. And that's why this situation is so tense inside Mercedes. Because they're not just adapting to a new rule. They're adapting to a new way of racing. A way where their biggest strength, that smooth, relentless consistency, is no longer guaranteed. And once that disappears, everything becomes unpredictable. Which leads to the real question heading into the next race. Not who is the fastest, but who adapts first. Because in Formula One, when a key advantage is removed, the team that reacts quickest wins. And for the first time this season, Mercedes might not be that team. And this is where everything comes down to one final reality. Because this isn't just about losing performance. It's about losing identity. Mercedes hasn't just been the fastest team this season. They've been the most consistent. The team that could control a race from any position. From the front, from the middle, even under pressure, even with problems, they always found a way to stay stable. That's what made them different. Now imagine taking that away. Not completely, but just enough. Because Formula One doesn't need to remove everything to change the result. It just needs to disturb the balance. And that's exactly what this battery fix does. It introduces variation. Moments where the car won't behave exactly the same way. Moments where energy won't be delivered with the same precision. Moments where the driver has to adapt, instead of trust. And that's where races are decided. Because Antonelli's biggest strength hasn't just been speed. It's been control under pressure. Miami proved that. Fighting through traffic, managing issues, holding off Norris without making a single decisive mistake. But that level of control depends on one thing. Predictability. Knowing exactly how the car will respond in every situation. Take that away, even slightly, and everything becomes harder. Braking zones feel different. Corner exits become less precise. Energy deployment becomes something you manage, instead of something you rely on. And that's when small errors appear. Not big mistakes. Small ones. A fraction too much throttle. A slightly delayed acceleration. A tiny hesitation that costs just enough. And those tiny moments are exactly what rivals are waiting for. Because McLaren doesn't need Mercedes to collapse. They just need a crack. One opening. One lap where the car doesn't respond the same way. And suddenly, Norris is not just close. He's attacking. Ferrari, with all their upgrades, now enters a different kind of fight. Not chasing a perfect machine, but competing in a field where perfection no longer exists. Red Bull, the same. Waiting. Ready to capitalize the moment consistency turns into uncertainty. And that's why this moment feels so big. Because this isn't just a technical change. It's a shift in power. A shift in how races are controlled. A shift in who holds the advantage when things get difficult. And that leads to the final truth. If Mercedes goes into the next race and still dominates, still controls, still delivers that same level of consistency, then this wasn't their advantage. It was their strength. But if they don't, if the car starts to feel different, if the gaps shrink, if the pressure turns into mistakes, then Miami won't be remembered as the confirmation of dominance. It will be remembered as the peak. The moment just before everything changed. Because in the end, this isn't just about a battery fix. It's about one question. Was Mercedes truly unbeatable? Or were they just perfectly built for a system that no longer exists? And this is where the final layer of this story reveals itself, the part nobody was focusing on at the beginning. Because the battery fix doesn't just affect performance during the race. It changes the moments that decide everything. Qualifying. Starts. Restarts. Those exact seconds where energy deployment can make the difference between leading or chasing. Think about the start in Miami. Antonelli lost positions into turn 1, not because of a mistake, but because of how the car delivered power in that initial phase. A small delay, a fraction of a second, and suddenly he's fighting instead of leading. Now imagine that scenario under a stricter energy system. Less flexibility. Less ability to optimize deployment in those critical moments. That doesn't just affect race pace. It affects track position. And in Formula One, track position is everything. Because if you don't lead, you fight. If you fight, you degrade tires. If you degrade tires, you lose consistency. And suddenly, the entire structure of the race changes. Mercedes has been avoiding that all season. They haven't just been fast. They've been ahead. Controlling races from clean air, avoiding traffic, dictating strategy instead of reacting to it. But this change threatens that. Because if their starts become weaker, if their qualifying edge shrinks, if they lose even one position at the wrong moment, everything becomes harder. And that's where the real danger is. Not in losing outright pace, but in losing control of the race. Because once you're in the pack, everything becomes unpredictable. Dirty air affects aerodynamics. Tire temperatures become harder to manage. Energy deployment becomes reactive instead of planned. And that's when races slip away. Now connect that back to Miami. Antonelli didn't win because he led from the start. He won because he recovered, and then controlled the race perfectly once he had track position. Take away that ability to regain and maintain control so cleanly, and that same race becomes much more difficult. Maybe impossible. And that's why this battery fix feels so much bigger than it looks. Because it doesn't just reduce an advantage. It disrupts a system. A system that allowed Mercedes to dictate races instead of survive them. And once that system is gone, they have to race like everyone else. Fight for positions. Defend under pressure. Manage unpredictability. And that's where the entire championship can change. Because the gap Antonelli has built, strong, consistent, almost untouchable until now, depends on one thing. Control. Take that away. And suddenly, every race becomes a question. Every strategy becomes a risk. Every lap becomes a fight. So when the next lights go out, we won't just be watching performance. We'll be watching something much more important. Whether Mercedes can still control the race, or whether they've just been pulled back into the chaos with everyone else. And if that happens, then this battery fix won't just be a technical adjustment. It will be remembered as the exact moment the championship truly began.